Okay, in this video we are going to cover how to create and send and automate our feedback forms for our workshops in the Center for Faculty Excellence. So on our CFE SharePoint, we have a list on the left side that connects to workshop feedback. So all of our feedback forms that we will create using Microsoft Forms are going to connect to the list in SharePoint via PowerAutomate flow to feed all of the data into this list. This list, which we will discuss in an additional video, will then connect to our Power BI desktop, so that way we can pull some data and do some visualization for our workshops and what kind of feedback we're getting. As you can see, you can filter by the semester and you can filter by the title of the workshop. And then we also have optional fill-in here for feedback from our participants to give us a narrative of their thoughts about the workshop. So let's go to the workshop feedback forms. To get to Microsoft Forms, you will want to make sure you've logged into your BGSU online web version of your email. And then you'll go to the Office 365 apps. As you can see, there's a lot here, and you'll select Forms. You can see there are a lot of forms that I have in here. Feedback forms, workshop registration forms that we've used for a variety of our events and workshops in the CFE. So I'm going to open one of our feedback forms here. Similar to how we name our workshop registration forms, we want to designate the semester and the year. So this FA stands for fall and 22 stands for 2022. So when you're preparing for spring and summer, spring would be SP23 for 2023, and summer would be SU23 for 2023. And then we want to title CFE workshop feedback and then what the specific workshop they are providing feedback for. We have our Likert scale here that we've already built, and then our narrative or descriptive feedback that attendees can type long form answer. So what I've done is shared a link to the template of this, and basically what you want to do for creating a template is you'll go over to the settings over here, collaborate or duplicate, and share as template, and then you would copy. So for your next workshop is you would then just paste that into your browser, duplicate it, and then all you would have to do, if this is a workshop or an event, is just change the title, because we're gathering the same type of feedback for each thing that we are hosting in the CFE to streamline our data. So all you have to do is change this part for the title. So I'm just going to do this as a test. And then you don't need to change anything for the description because we keep that the same, letting them know it's going to be anonymous. And then to distribute the link for gathering feedback, you would use the collect responses button. And this is the link that you would use when you want to actually get feedback from any participants. So this is how we actually set up the form. And I want to show you how we connect it to our SharePoint list. So that way when someone fills out the form, all of this data goes into that list that I showed you previously. So to do that, we need to create a PowerAutomate flow. So as you can see here, I have PowerAutomate open. This is another one of the apps in the Microsoft suite. So you just open your app bar and select PowerAutomate. So you'll have all of your automates in here for the workshops that you create and the the feedback that you have. So I want to show you how to create an automate. We're going to create two separate automates for workshop feedback, and I'll show you why. The first one that we're going to do is the data that we receive from the form, and we want to feed it into the workshop feedback list in SharePoint. So let's scroll down here and I'll show you how I've done that. Okay, so I want to open this one, GSI Teaching Online Workshop, Fall 2022 Workshop Feedback. So let's edit so we can open that and see the steps that we have. We only have 3 steps because we want to get the response data from the form and we want to load it into that SharePoint list. So I want to show you how I built this so that you can build your own flows. So the first thing we want to do is when a new response is submitted, you can see this icon here is from Microsoft Forms, and we want to select that workshop feedback form. So from our dropdown, we would select the form that we're pulling the data from, Fall 2022 CFE Workshop Feedback, GSI Teaching Online. And we want to get the responses from that form. So here we want to select that form again from our dropdown, Fall 2022 CFE Workshop Feedback, GSI Teaching Online, and we want to pull the list of respondents. The next step, and to build new steps in between, is you would just click the plus, insert a new step, add an action, and then this is where you could search for an operation, but we don't need to build one in there. And then you want to create an item. So you want to have all of those, the feedback, creating a row on the Microsoft SharePoint list. Excuse me. So we would select from our insert new step, SharePoint, create an item. We would select the Center for Faculty Excellence, SharePoint, because that's the site that we're using. And then we want to select from those lists, as you can see there's a couple other lists we have, we want to do workshop feedback because it's going to feed all of that into that workshop feedback list. Then each time we will manually input the title of the workshop, the date of the workshop, and this format is just month and numerical day, and then the semester and the year. And then here we want to input the data fields in their corresponding column. So the facilitator was knowledgeable on, and then you would scroll down over here and select the correct one. As you can see, I already have all of them filled out. So that's it for those 3 steps, just to get that information fed into the SharePoint list. I'm going to go back to my flows. You will need to do this for every single feedback form that's created, but once you have one flow built, what you'll do is you'll just go over here. So we have this flow built, and we'll just save as, and then you would just rename it for your next feedback form. So say your next workshop feedback form that you're creating is for an inclusive pedagogy workshop, and then you would just retitle that and then save it. And it takes a little bit here to save. Then you would go back up here. As you can see, these are not turned on. That's why they're grayed out. And then you go in and edit. And then you would select that form for that specific workshop. So we would have to go and select the Inclusive Pedagogy Workshop there and there. And then you would go down to the Create Item, and you would just change these data columns, are the ones that you would manually have to change. You would not have to change these because it's already pulling in that data from the form. And then you would save, go back to My Flows. When you have all of that updated with the next workshop, you would go on here and you would turn on. It's always a good idea to test as well to make sure that it's actually working and feeding into the SharePoint list. So you would just want to go back over here to your workshop feedback, and let's open this one here. And I'm just going to do NA when I'm testing that so that people know it's just a test. And then I'll just manually type in here, test, test, submit. And then you would want to go back to the SharePoint list. I'm going to just refresh this page here. Workshop feedback. So we could either just scroll all the way down, all the way down to the bottom. Or you could filter to see if your workshop feedback was loaded in here. Let's see if we can filter by the name. Teaching online. Yep, so you can see NA, 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 and you scroll over, test, test, test. So that flow works, and usually after I test it, I'll just select this, and then I'll select delete, because we don't actually need that data. So I want to remove my filters. And I want to remove my filter on that. Okay, so the next PowerAutomate flow that we will need to do that connects to our workshop feedback form is our attendance trigger. So when we have our workshop facilitators, instructional designers in our office, what they'll do is after they have a workshop, they'll go over to the workshop registrants list over here. They'll filter for their workshop. Let me see if I can find one. Filter for a fall semester. Okay, so then what they'll do is they'll find their workshop. So let's say that I was the facilitator for the Navigate workshop. They would go into this list and filter for their workshop, select Edit and Grid View. And then from the attendance column, they will select from the drop-down either yes or no. And then if it's yes or no, after they're done, they would select Exit Grid View. So this is how we also use our workshop registrants as our attendance tracking. And what's really important is when the facilitator goes in here and selects yes for attendance, what we're going to do is create an automated trigger that when this is selected yes, all of the attendees who have yes will get an automatic email to the BGSU email that has a link to fill out that workshop feedback form that we just created. Sounds kind of complicated, but I'll show you how to set up that flow. So we're going to go back into our automated flows, PowerAutomate. So in order to do this, you need to already have your workshop feedback form created. You need to already have connected the first PowerAutomate to make sure that the workshop feedback data from the form is feeding into the workshop feedback list. And then you'll want to do this step to automate the trigger so the workshop feedback form is distributed to those who are marked as having attended the workshop in the workshop registrants list. A lot of steps there. So, as you can see, I have right here workshop feedback email trigger. So let's go over the steps for that so you know how to create that email trigger yourself. So we'll go to Edit. Now there's 2 steps, but the second step has conditions that need to be met. So the first step is from that SharePoint list. So we select our site, Center for Faculty Excellence, and we are pulling it from the workshop registrants list. Because once the facilitator selects in that list that yes, from the drop-down in the attendance column, that they did attend, that's going to trigger the next branching logic condition. So we want to make sure that the attendee gets the correct feedback form email. So we don't want the attendee to get an email that has a feedback form for a workshop that they didn't attend. So we need to set up a few conditions here. So the first condition, and this is something that you'll edit for each individual workshop because we want to make sure that the GSI workshop attendants are getting the GSI workshop feedback form. So when attendance from the attendance column is equal to yes, and the title of the workshop from the title of the workshop column is equal to GSI Teaching Online Workshop, and the date of the workshop is equal to, and you put the date because sometimes we will have multiple offerings of the same workshop. So say that we're doing an Intro to Canvas workshop. We're going to create a feedback form for each of those Intro to Canvas workshop offerings. So we want to make sure if we didn't have this step, we wouldn't be able to send those individual forms. It would all just be the same form and we wouldn't get clean data. So we want to make sure we add the step that indicates which date of the workshop it is. So we have our conditions. So once all of these conditions are met, we want to make sure that they get that email. So it goes over here, if yes, and then this is where you would add the action, and I've selected the action to be send an email because we want to make sure we're sending them an email with the link to complete that feedback form. So to email, because it'll be the participant's email, subject. This is where we would type in CFE workshop feedback, and then for which specific workshop, the one that they attended. And then in the body of the email, we want to select their name because we want to individualize it. And then thank you for attending, list the title of the workshop. Please take a few moments to complete the workshop feedback survey. This is where you would go in and you would link it to, and then you would copy the link, or you would copy this link for the form that you created, and you would link it to create that hyperlink so that they could click on that and fill out the form. So, a lot of steps. Go over here and save. Now, it's always important to test. Of course, remember, we always want to make sure that we test it. So I'm going to go back over to my flows. And you can see this is turned on. So again, these are not turned on. So you always want to make sure before you test your flow that it's turned on. Okay, yes, it's turned on. So to test your flow, you want to make sure that you are beginning with the correct trigger. And for this trigger, it's when someone's attendance is marked as yes in the workshop registrants form. Okay, to test the workshop feedback trigger, what we'll do is we will go back to our SharePoint and we will go to our workshop registrants list. So we want to trigger the GSI online workshop. So let's filter for that. Okay, apply. Okay, so as you can see, I have tested a few times as a registrant. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to mark myself as attended to make sure and confirm that I get the correct email with the workshop feedback form. So to do that, we'll go to Edit and Grid View, Attendance, select Yes, and Exit Grid View. Okay. Now we want to wait and see if we get that email. Okay, so it looks like I did get the email for CFE workshop feedback. So let's open the email. And here is that automate that we created for the trigger of the attendance being yes. So thank you for the GSI Teaching Online Workshop. Please take a few moments to complete the workshop feedback survey. The attendees would select the link and it would take them directly to the feedback survey. So there's a lot of steps that go into creating this, and we have to do it for every single workshop. For every single workshop, we want to create the individual workshop feedback forms. We want to automate that feedback form for the data to feed into our SharePoint list for workshop feedback. And then we want to create another automate that when the facilitator goes into the workshop registrants list and indicates that someone has attended the workshop as yes, that the attendant will then get a link to complete that workshop feedback. So we want to make sure we do this for all of our workshops and events, and that we test them to make sure that everything is running smoothly. And that's how we get all of our data that will feed into our Power BI dashboard that we will discuss in a further video.